Hi there, it's Dr. Embody. For each project, I like to make a little video, hopefully get you started with things. So here we are with the one for Project 1. So let's take a look at it. So in this project, the only thing we have at this point is arithmetic. One of the things that I like to do with my family is go backcountry canoe camping. And one of the interesting things about it is that if you look on the maps, the portages, and those are these black lines here, they have some distances on them, and those distances are in this archaic unit called a rod. A rod is about 5 meters long, which happens to be about the length of a canoe, so it's a pretty handy way to measure distances. And when you go wilderness canoe camping, you paddle across the lake, then you carry your stuff to the next lake, paddle across that, carry your stuff to the next lake, and gradually make your way into the wilderness. It's a picture of me out canoeing in the wilderness. It's a picture of my daughter on a portage. Actually, it's a pretty nice one. It's nice and wide and so on. But you can see, you've got to carry all your gear in your canoe over to the next lake, and that's how you get further and further into the wilderness. And so since these measurements are in rods, one of the questions is, all right, so if I have to make a portage of 444 rods, how long is that going to take me? Is that big or small or whatever? So that's what we're going to do in this project is we're going to try and convert, and it's just some simple arithmetic. And what we're going to do is take the number of rods we have, convert it into meters, feet, miles, furlongs, just for kicks and giggles, and really the thing that we're interested in is how long will it take me to walk that distance. Now there's a bunch of conversion factors, so we give you some so we all end up with the same number. And at the end you're going to have this project, and one of the things you have to do is you have to name your projects exactly like we specify, and then use the hand-in system to hand them in. For this project, I do have some sample output, and the first ones, we ask you prompts for some input, one rod, so we do that so it's easy to convert, and so we convert them into meters, feet, miles, furlongs, and how many minutes it takes you to walk. You'll notice that these floating point values come out to be like really ridiculously number of precision. Don't worry about that now. We can take care of that. Remember that floating points are approximations. And so if you were to work this out by hand, you might not get that exact level of precision because floating points are approximation. We've got a fixed number of bits on the computer, and floating points are a continuum, and so mathematically that's kind of how it has to work out. So I did an input with 1 rod and an input with 10 rods just because it's easy to do the arithmetic and test it out, and then showed you one where we did that portage of 444 rods, and that should take us about 26 minutes to cover. Of course, this assumes a walking rate, and when you're carrying a canoe on your back and stumbling over roots and so on, it would probably take you longer than that, but that gives us something for this. There's a scoring rubric. Talks a little bit. It's got scoring standard, and one thing, if you can correctly calculate those distances like we had there, you'll get 10 of the points, and I'm going to have to, I just noticed right now that that adds up to 16 points, and that's and whereas in fact it's supposed to be 15 points. So after this video I'll fix that up. Okay, so one of the things that we do in this is when we're doing our Python programming, we will do it. Anaconda gives us this nice thing called Spider, which is an IDE, Integrated Development Environment. The spot over here is where we type our Python. When we do input and output, that's down in this window. And then here, the variables that we create, when we highlight the variable explorer, that will show up here, and that can kind of be helpful when things go wrong. So let's take a look at this. And for this particular project, notice I have set up my folder or directory, however you want to call it, here, so that I'm dealing with my own project 1. And that's selected with this icon right here. So I know I'm in the right place, and I can go here. I can do a drop down, and well, I guess I can't drop it down at the same time, but there is the option to open a file, and so we can do that, or we can use the shortcut. And then we got a dialog. I'm on a Mac here. It looks slightly different. We give you this program called numberinput.py. So let me open that up. And what this program does, let's just run it. So to start with, the buttons that you will use up here are saving things and running things. So those are the buttons that we'll be starting with here. These ones in here, these blue ones, that'll be for debugging. That's handy later on. So first of all, I'm going to run this code, and now your attention should move down into this corner down here, and there we will, it says please enter an integer. There's an integer 2. Please enter a floating point number 3.2. And now it tells me that the two numbers I input are 2 and 3.2. Their sum is 5.2. Their product is 6.4. So we've got code here that does 3 things. It takes some input. It does some calculations. And it has some output. And that's exactly what we're doing in this project. We're doing in this project, if you think about it, if you look at a sample here, is we have some input. We do some calculations that we can't see here, and then we do some output. All right. So same 3 steps. Input, step 1, do some calculations, and then output, which is exactly what this sample program does. Now the question comes, all right, we've got this set up. What are these calculations that I need to do? Well, that's conversions. And guess what? You can go back and by looking at one of these, we give you the conversions that you need to do, at least the values that you need to do. So using pencil and paper, figure out how to do the conversions. So you absolutely should not start to do this project until you can do this with pencil and paper. And by the way, you can do the pencil and paper part with somebody else. Grab a partner and work through the pencil and paper. It's only when you start typing Python that we expect you to do that on your own. So use a pencil and paper and a calculator and come up, try these conversions. We've got 3 sets here. Get those done, and once you've figured out the arithmetic, well, you've done most of the work. So a lot of this, what you'll find in this course is that there's 2 parts to this. One is solving the problem, and part 2 is now figuring out how to do that in Python. If you haven't figured out how to solve the problem, you're not going to be able to write the Python. So you've got to figure out how to solve the problem independent of the computer, and then figure out how to convert your solution into Python. And then one of the most common mistakes that people make in this course is not realizing that. Right? You got to solve the problem, come up with an algorithm. It's a trivial algorithm here, just a little arithmetic conversion, but you got to do that first. And then once you've done that, doing the Python isn't that hard. All right? And so you can take this program that we give you. You can save that as your Project01.py and just make changes to things a little bit at a time. And make life simple for yourself. The first thing that you should do is do these two lines: input a value, print out what you have. Okay, so there's step one. Now it says convert it to meters. All right, write the formula, which you should have done by hand by now, and now see if I can, when I input a 1, I can print out that I have 5 meters. Okay, now I'm on a roll. Let's do the same thing for feet. Let's do the same thing for miles, furlongs. All right, this one, oh gee, this actually takes maybe 2 arithmetic operations. And so you can do that one last after you've got the other ones done. But you've got it figured out on paper and pencil, and away you go. Remember, you've got to hand this in using the, when you're all done, you need to hand this in using the hand-in system. And don't forget item number 2 here, that we do have a coding standard. There's a link to it, and we will enforce those, because you can see that in the grading rubric there are points for it, for using the coding standard. So hopefully this gives you enough to get started on it. Good luck.